Hi, thank you very much for joining us for the panel. There is no denying that we're pretty deep into an AI hype cycle. We're witnessing product developers integrating AI into pretty much everything out there. You, if you so wish, can buy a toaster that is AI enhanced. But there's one area where there's real potential, and that is in healthcare. We're seeing artificial intelligence being explored for drug discovery, for automating surgery, for analyzing scans and images, and for optimizing how patients engage with health services. But the question is, how close are patients to actually seeing tangible benefits from this research? Is AI in healthcare living up to the hype, or are we waiting still for much of its potential to still be delivered? Here today to discuss the impact of artificial intelligence on health and what we can expect in years to come, we have three speakers from organizations that are at the forefront of AI research. I'm really pleased to welcome Danielle Belgrave, Vice President of AI and Machine Learning at GSK. She leads teams across academia and industry focused on scientific discovery and personalizing interventions in health. Welcome, Danielle. We also have Peter Hames, who's Vice President of Health at Microsoft AI and an NHS Innovation Fellow. And Ben Maruthappu is the founder and CEO of Cera, the UK's largest health tech company, which uses technology and AI to shift care from hospitals to patients' homes. Thank you so much for being here today. It's great to have such an esteemed and varied panel. Can I start by asking each of you, how your companies are using AI and where we think this is going to make a difference to patients in the future? I mean, maybe, Danielle, maybe you can kick us off.
Yeah, so at GSK, we're using AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning to get actionable insights from drug design to drug development. So looking across the whole pipeline in the pharmaceutical pipeline and trying to see how to match the right patient to the right drug. So our portfolio spans across oncology, respiratory medicine, and vaccines as well. And here we're seeing real impact in terms of the potential and also what we can do in terms of understanding biomarkers, understanding heterogeneity of patients' response, and how can we translate data into actionable insights to get medicines and treatments to patients. The second area where we're looking at understanding the use of AI in the landscape of the pharmaceutical industry is just understanding biology. And I think that last year was really a breakthrough moment in artificial intelligence for healthcare when we saw the Nobel Prize for AlphaFold. And how can we understand, using patients' data and patient insights, what are the building blocks of response to therapies? Because we know different patients respond differently to therapies. So how can we unlock this using machine learning from the data that we have, understanding patient response? And then there's the whole area of productivity. So how can we use artificial intelligence to accelerate the things we do in everyday life, like with large language models, using that to see what is our workflow, how can we optimize workflow, and what are the specific use cases that we can translate that into productivity and efficiency in our pipeline.
Excellent, thank you. Ben, could you tell us a bit about sort of how Cera operates? Because I feel like we've got stuff upstream, like at this sort of research and development end of the health spectrum, and then we've got Cera kind of at the other that's like incredibly patient focused.
Absolutely. So we at Cera take healthcare from hospital to home, so patients can receive services where they are. And we have thousands of frontline staff, mainly carers, nurses, and physiotherapists, delivering those services. We now provide about 2 million in-person home visits a month across the country, so almost 30 million a year to patients nationwide. And every time our frontline staff are visiting people in their home, they log information about those visits on our app using their smartphone. And the symptoms someone may be experiencing, what they're eating and drinking, how their health is progressing. We then run AI and analytics on that information to predict the likelihood of someone becoming unwell. And we can predict with over 80% accuracy the likelihood of someone having a fall, ending up in hospital, or having a health deterioration a week before it occurs. Our system then flags the most appropriate actions that a frontline member of staff can be taking. And through those interventions, we've shown that we can reduce hospitalizations by over half, so up to 70%, and cut falls by 20%. And this is important because the people we care for tend to be the oldest and most vulnerable in society. They would otherwise be admitted to hospital around 8 times a year, and we get that down to more like 3 times a year. We're also starting to use AI in many other parts of the business that I guess are more back office orientated. So managing scheduling, contracts, and now all the way to actually starting, we just this year started using robotics to deliver care in the home in a more sustainable and scalable way.
And then Peter, how is Microsoft AI working in the health
Great.
space?
Awesome. Yeah, so Microsoft at large has a very long history in healthcare. You know, we supply the cloud infrastructure for health providers, health systems worldwide. On the AI front, the focus to date has been on clinician-facing tools. So to give you a sense of scale, across all of the clinician productivity tools driven by AI, 8 billion lines of dictation are gathered every year, through Microsoft's tools. So the scale is enormous, and looking ahead, our perspective is that the biggest opportunity for impact is through generative AI. So healthcare at large is in big trouble. We know that demand is growing as the population ages, the growth in chronic conditions, and yet the models of supply today are already incapable of meeting that demand. So World Health Organization estimates that we're short 10 million health workers already, and 4.5 billion people in the world, half the world's population, don't have access to even essential healthcare. And so in that context, generative AI offers this generational opportunity to radically expand access to high quality care while saving costs. And so, we're a new team inside Microsoft AI that is focused on that sort of Microsoft scale challenge, like a global view on these sort of foundational problems facing healthcare, but with this belief that generative AI offers us this moment of opportunity to actually bridge that gap in need.
And how would a clinician use generative AI? Like, what does that look like on a kind of day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so I think when you look at the spectrum of potential applications of AI in the practice of healthcare, it runs from this spectrum of where everyone started, which was non-clinical applications within the clinician workflow. And that is, just all the blocking and tackling that can be automated, essentially, from note-taking, creating summarization, so on and so forth. And so that has been where I think a lot of the focus has been on to date. And I think what's exciting is as we shift, further on that spectrum, closer to the actual individual and being able to directly help individuals with their health.
Danielle, generative AI, is that something that kind of GSK is working on or working with as well when it comes to kind of drug discovery? Like, how does the drug discovery element of your AI work?
Yeah, so generative AI, I guess, is a broad term to think of how do we generate new insights or generate other types of data from the data that we have. So we can see language models as a type of generative AI because we're generating processes or generating language from prompts or instructions. So I think the most embedded part of Gen AI that we have is in Jules, which is our internal LLM that we have. And we have one called Gigi as well, which is more about productivity workflows across the company. But we can think of generative AI as well as these foundation models, which also unlock a lot of other insights as well. So I think in the space of artificial intelligence, health is actually the most challenging aspect of anything we can do from a data perspective. Because if we think of something like games are very deterministic, but health is just so random, and it's not a finite set of moves that we can make on a chessboard. So, but we have the added challenge that we don't have the scale of data as well. So foundation models are a really important element in thinking how can we generalize models as quickly as possible based on small data sets. So recently we published on our blog some work we're doing in the space of genomics. Even though we have large genomics data sets, how can we use these small data sets, because we think of the variety in the variation of genomics in the human scale at a population level, how do you generalize that to other aspects of the population as well? So generative AI in terms of genetics to understand response to treatments as well, this is one of the aspects of generative AI. And within healthcare, we also have lots of modalities of data. So a lot of the work we do as well is with computational pathology. So how do we get insights from biopsies as well to identify biomarkers of response to some of our drugs, like in oncology as well. So there are lots of different fields where generative AI within the landscape of the pharmaceutical pipeline at GSK, where we're looking at influencing as well how we how we make decisions about matching patients to treatments.
And some people here might be familiar with this. There's a company called In Silico Medicine, which is kind of, they've got quite far down the kind of pipeline of getting an AI-generated drug kind of into patients for testing. How close are we, do you think, to seeing drugs kind of developed with the help of AI actually rolling out to patients and making a difference in the community?
Yeah, I think this is a challenging space, and it's really exciting when we see those sorts of success stories as well, where we're able to identify a target and then take it through to the pipeline to phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and into patients as well. I think that a lot of the acceleration of AI is in the target identification. But this only shortens the life cycle of the process of getting approval for a drug by about 2 to 5 years. Once we identify targets, there still needs to be that work in following the pipeline of the pharmaceutical industry as well. So even though we can shorten it, there is still a lot to do in terms of accelerating the pipeline. And thinking of how we can use AI for each of those phases of drug development is a great challenge as well, but I'm optimistic. And I think examples like what we've seen in silico as well are great. In GSK, we are using it to accelerate biomarker discovery and decision-making, maximizing the probability of success of a drug as well, which also is the strategy that a lot of these companies are using. So I think that's the key, but we're not close to shortening the pipeline by a lot, but we are shortening it.
Ben, when we're thinking about kind of deploying AI kind of out in the community, like what are the challenges of getting it integrated into a health service or system and actually used by, people physically kind of interacting with patients?
Yeah, so I tend to view that through a couple of lenses. One is the adoption of the technology itself, but then also the adaptation that goes with it. So when it comes to adoption of technologies, and this has been going on for a while now in healthcare, and Peter can probably add to what I'm going to say. Rolling out technology in healthcare is difficult because it's a regulated environment, so rightly so, because we're dealing with people's lives, but that will decelerate, in some cases, the rollout of a new product or technology. It's multi-stakeholder, so the organization or person who's paying for the product, which very frequently could be an NHS commissioner or an insurer, is different from the person who's administering it, which could be a nurse, a doctor, a physiotherapist, who's in turn different from the person using and benefiting from it primarily, which is the patient. And that fragmentation in stakeholders does also decelerate the adoption of technology. Then procurement in healthcare, not just in the UK, but internationally, can be quite slow. So when you put all that together, adoption is tricky. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done there in this country and elsewhere so that we can really embrace AI solutions and tools at a time when they're probably needed more than ever. The other side of the coin is probably adaptation. And what I mean by that is, so we've spoken briefly about generative AI. And I think there are cases even in NHS hospitals where generative AI products are being used for, let's say, optimizing clinical note-taking. So a consultant sees a patient, and then there are tools, different startups focusing on this, which automate the formulation of a letter from that consultation just by listening to it, that can then be sent to a GP, sent to a patient, and also record the notes for how that consultation went. In some hospitals in this country where that's being done, that is saving time, right? It's saving lots of time and is improving the quality of experience for clinicians. But there isn't actually an increase in the number of patients those clinicians are seeing. And on top of that, the administrative staff who would otherwise be involved in writing up the letters manually are not necessarily being reallocated to other lines of work. Mm-hmm. And so there you have a brilliant tool which could improve productivity and has a lot of value to provide NHS hospitals. But because there hasn't been the adaptation in the clinical work stream, workflow, and how clinicians are operating and administrative staff are operating, the value is not being unlocked, whether it's financial or whether it's productivity and efficiency. And so it's a combination of both the adoption of technology, but also the adaptation that happens to harness the value and also encourage it to be used by other organizations as well.
Peter, does that sound sort of familiar from your perspective?
I think Ben's referring to prior to Microsoft AI, I, for over a decade, ran a company I founded called Big Health, which was doing something very weird at the time, which we now call digital therapeutics. So trying to find ways of getting adoption and scaling this very novel, strange technology was a big part of the effort over those 10 years. What is striking to me about this wave of technology is that we almost, in certain domains, have the opposite problem, which is that the sort of genie is out of the bottle. There's a BMJ open paper last year that looked at the percentage of GPs that were already using generative AI tools in their practice. It was around 1 in 5, right? That's from a year ago, which was about 1 year after ChatGPT launched. So I'd be amazed if that wasn't significantly higher. And from just folks, like everyone in this room, I would be amazed if a significant portion had not used one of these tools to ask it a health question or get guidance on a health topic. So the cat is out the bag, the genie is out the bottle. Our challenge is less so, I find, which I find very exciting, about driving adoption fundamentally for this technology, but rather our challenge is to steer it in a way that ensures that it meets the same qualities of safety, efficacy, privacy and security that we would expect for any innovation that we're using in healthcare.
I'm glad you mentioned privacy, because I feel like you can't really talk about AI without sort of thinking about data privacy. I was just wondering, how does each of your organizations kind of approach that question of data security and privacy for patients who are involved?
Yeah, so I guess I could start. So the pharmaceutical industry is highly regulated, and I think that this is something that's really important, the whole area of responsible AI. So within GSK, within the tech organization, we have a VP of responsible AI as well, that looks both at the policies, so what are the policies that govern algorithms, how is legislation changing, and also how are we adopting to legislation, but also how are we being proactive in being responsible about the use of AI. So this is really exciting for me, thinking proactively in this field of when we're moving from diagnosis to delivery, or moving from drug development to delivery and impacting patient lives. How do we think of that as an end-to-end pipeline as well? So responsible AI is at the core of what we do, but not just from a policy perspective, but within this team, we also have engineers who also have, it's like an external validation of the algorithms that we build. So it's like testing the algorithms we build in terms of reliability, robustness, reproducibility, and seeing what are the metrics within each of the projects that we do to validate that we are using these algorithms responsibly. And I think it's really important having these teams which are co-located with the core problems that we're working on and doing that validation in responsible AI as well. And within GSK more broadly in the tech organization, we also have an AI policy, which we've had since 2019. And I think this is really important that it's embedded in the way that we think of privacy, safety, and deploying algorithms in a responsible way as well, and thinking of the ethical implications as well.
Peter, how about at Microsoft? Like, data is kind of at the core of what you do, so I assume you think about this quite a lot.
And this is, I think, a huge, a big part of the reason why I think that Microsoft is well placed to tackle these enormous problems in healthcare, because security, trust is foundational to Microsoft's overall business. We have an Office of Responsible AI that is dedicated to thinking about and checking that all the activities over the company meet these principles of responsible AI. We have 8,500 security researchers and engineers. So that is a really strong foundation of all of the work that we're doing. And that, in the same way that I suppose brakes on a car is what allows you to drive fast, then that kind of foundational sort of safe, that commitment to security, privacy, and trust is what is enabling our team at Microsoft AI to move quickly to innovate and explore the potential benefits of this new technology.
And Ben, I mean, you're working with millions of patients, so this must be something that's integral to Cera as well, right?
I would echo the fact that it is foundational, right? And we built our technology with this first in mind. Every individual who we consent for our services, every patient, we're very transparent about the ways we could use their data, and if they're comfortable with that, all the way through to continuous monitoring, testing, making sure that our data we're very robustly using encryption and authentication. There's a whole spectrum of activities that we continuously work on because it's such a priority.
Yeah. Ben, can I ask you as well about scaling? Because you just mentioned you're working with millions of patients. Like, how do you get AI tech from piloting and development through to being used in multiple places across a country at scale?
So for us, it's easy because we're building our technology in-house, and also our frontline staff are members of our company. So that makes it easier than necessarily if we were rolling out technology to another provider organization that wasn't necessarily focused on innovating and transforming the sector. However, what I would say is the tools we build, we're very focused on ensuring they actually support our frontline staff in delivering a better service, removing the friction from their day-to-day, making it easier. And if we start with that and ensuring that the user experience also is really smooth, they see the benefits immediately. And they want to use the technology. And actually that word spreads in the organization as we're rolling out the new products and tools from a couple of parts of the country to nationwide. And I always find that's the best way to roll out software, because if people are really hungry to use it because they've heard about the benefits, then you won't have many challenges. I think it's more when someone has come up with an interesting product or tool which isn't necessarily affecting a day-to-day challenge that a member of our frontline is experiencing, then there's more of a disconnect. And that's why a lot of our products, we've focused on improving health outcomes, addressing inefficiencies, or removing friction from the patient and healthcare staff journey so that adoption is high.
We talked about the genie being out of the bottle. Are we moving too quickly? Are we moving too slowly? Are we moving just about right? Like, given the importance of people's health, should we be worried about kind of this pace at which AI is being rolled out? Or should we be strapping ourselves in and actually asking for a faster pace because this could be transformational? Peter, maybe.
I don't think we get to decide to some extent. I think that this is, ChatGPT was the fastest growing consumer product at all time, right? It was like 100 million users in 2 months, I think. It's been around, this technology in public hands has been around for just over 2 years. So I think it is unprecedented, the pace of adoption, the pace of usage that we're seeing in these technologies. And I think, as I say, I think unfortunately, we don't get to control that pace. It is going to keep up at this speed, if not faster. The onus, however, our responsibility is, like I say, to steer it in a way that meets all the same high standards that you would expect of any form of technology in healthcare. And that, I think, is eminently possible. And I think the way around that we think about it is more like we need to run at the pace of, we now need to get up to the speed of development of this technology, as you say, for the sake of both the positive impact it can have and avoiding any negative consequences.
Danielle, what about speed in kind of drug development? Do you think we're going fast enough?
Yeah, I think that there is a great sense of urgency, that we accelerate things, that we discover things. But I do think that we do need to do things carefully as well. So making sure, as Peter was saying, we almost don't have a choice in terms of timelines. But there's an urgency in what can we do now and what are the problems that we can solve now in terms of discovery, patient insights, and understanding. But also making sure that we have those guardrails in place, that we're doing things responsibly, safely. And it's a trade-off in terms of timing. So ideally, we'd want to move faster, but we don't want to break things. So doing things safely, responsibly is super important because the stakes are high in health. And we need to make sure that as someone was saying, it's a commitment as well that we have to have positive social impact in the healthcare domain. So we need to make sure that we're doing things carefully as well.
What I'd probably add to that is, I think it's important to distinguish between what's happening on a global landscape, broader trends, versus what's happening in healthcare. So AI at a global level is moving incredibly quickly. ChatGPT, but then more recently DeepSeek, Manus, and then that's compounded somewhat by the more recent volatility in the political environment that we're seeing, which is causing things to move quite quickly and be difficult to predict. But in the same way, if you rewind 10, 20 years, the internet revolution moved quickly and affected many sectors before it affected healthcare. Same with digital. And there are still GP practices in corners of the NHS that are very analog and integrated in nature. And there is a difference between, yes, global trends for consumers versus what are procured systems that a healthcare organization that's large but perhaps a bit traditional has intentionally used, adopted, and is paying for. And I think that's where actually things may be going too slowly. And there could be faster adoption of AI tools to improve productivity. The NHS is facing the biggest productivity challenge that perhaps it's ever faced. It's a great time for AI tools, proven ones that can also improve things in the back office, to be used, but we're not necessarily seeing the traction that we'd like to see in the health service or in other health systems, which would benefit patients.
Okay. Can I ask a final question then? In 5 years' time, where would you like to see kind of your sector at when it comes to its use of AI? Danielle, maybe start with you.
So I think we've seen a lot in the past 5 years in terms of discovery. I think the next 5 years, moving closer to adoption and really having these high impact use cases as well. I think we'll see more and more of that. We have seen some already, but we will see more acceleration in terms of the drug development pipeline.
5 years, almost unimaginable at this pace, but I would want to see these generative AI tools in the hands of billions more in a way, and for their impact, safety to be validated, and as a result, to see a radical increase in access to high quality healthcare and the cost curve of healthcare start to bend.
So widespread use of AI in multiple parts of the patient and clinical journey, but in a safe, responsible way.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We're really pleased to have you. And yes, thank you very much for coming to the panel. If you have any questions for our panelists, they'll be around for a little bit afterwards, so please don't be shy. I'll hand you back to Amit. Thank you very much.
Thank you.